Hello and welcome to Welcoming Communities, the allyship training from being a bystander to an upstander. Um, my name is Nu Tao, and I am the farmer wellness um, and land access specialist. And also here with me is Lori.
Hi, and welcome. And I'm Lori Stern. I'm the executive director at Marbleseed. Glad you've joined us today. So, just to start off, why we're offering this training in the name of kind of enduring understanding, or what we hope people are going to take with them after the training, is that xenophobia and racism has a long history in rural places. We want people to feel like they have the skills to act as an ally upstander for people in their communities that may be seen as outsiders or are targets of racism. And also understanding that there are lots of other folks willing to create a network of safety and allyship across the Midwest. So we started thinking about this training, obviously hearing from lots of farmers in rural places that had finally been able to kind of leave more populated urban centers and get their dream farm, only to discover that the community was not welcoming. And in some cases, they even sold that farm that they had worked so hard to purchase and went back to the city. And I think that this is timely also because rural America is getting more diverse. And so the slides from the census in 2020 kind of indicate what's happening in terms of racial diversity of the population in non-metro areas. And what you're going to see here too is that on the left is the population over 18, but on the right, we're looking at kids 0 to 17. So oftentimes you go into rural communities and the classrooms in schools look more diverse than the community themselves. That just kind of gives you an idea of like anticipating what that community is going to look like in the future. And so we know that diversity in rural places is on the increase, and we want those communities to continue on the path of being welcoming and and glad to have the richness that diversity brings in those communities. Also, this training comes from a understanding that agriculture is deeply dependent on immigrant labor, and it's a system that is inherently racist. Um, from the time that we brought slaves into this country for the purpose of our agriculture endeavors, and that those folks were chosen because of their agricultural knowledge, to indigenous communities that have long histories of stewarding the land, that were pushed out of their own communities where they had that relationship and were growing food and creating vibrant places, to our current situation where we so rely on immigrant labor for most of the food that we consume in this country. So you're sort of seeing back in 1937 all the way until current time, just how dependent our system is on immigrant labor uh, and and labor that often came stolen to our agricultural systems.
As Lori has mentioned, the US has a long history of racism within agriculture. We've seen that through the Pigford case, through 40 acres in a mule, along with sundown towns that have been historically deemed as unsafe for certain groups to be in after the sun starts to set. And if you would like more information on it, there is a link there, a web link there to the tagalog.edu website where there's more information about sundown towns. And those are towns that have, been historically have either been, deemed as unsafe um, and or currently is or isn't, and you can find out more information about that as well. Next slide, please, Lori. Yes. And so when we talk about, right, barriers to upstander, to becoming an upstander, right, and we focus just on that bystander component, um, what are we talking about, right? What is actually keeping us from becoming upstanders in the situation? Um, and one of the great things that I love to share is personal experiences in this area, and situations of, clearly you guys could see, I am a person of color, and it comes that, when you are the only person of color in the room and you do voice and you do say something, I'm not shy of the eye rolls, not been shy of the, oh, there New goes again. She's complaining. She always has to say something, or New's going to say something now that we're on this topic. Um, and so, right, marginalized groups seen as complainers, at at the table in the room, having, the same topic of conversation going. Um, and then also that, you know, determining, right, how do we interpret the situation, um, right, and the topic as well that is being talked about, right. And this is something that I do personally over and over again, where I am like, okay, this passive aggressive behavior that's going on, is this, did I just get a racist remark that I'm reading a little bit into? What is it? And so not knowing and, right, interpreting the situation. And then in in situation, where power is a question here, right? Me not saying anything, or the person, um, the victim not saying anything, because they have that fear of, okay, if I do say something, if I do something, it comes back. It comes back to me. I can lose my job. Um, it's better to just not say anything at all. Um, and right, and then also that social relationship. Um, do we have that social relationship to be able to voice something, to actually say something, to do something, um, and also the social norms, um, right, that are either tolerant or not tolerant of the situation, and of what is going on. And so, do we feel supported, to be able to say something? Does social norm back us up? Do they not back us up? And then the social and economic causes behind it all, right? When you do transition to being upstander, in and what I brought up earlier, right? If you are in a place, where power is a matter, of contingence here, and so if you do say something and your boss says no, you get fired over it, right? That becomes then, a cost for you, because now where does money come in to pay the bills? How do you feed your family? How do you move forward in this? So there are lots of barriers to moving from being a bystander to being an upstander. And we'll talk some more about how we can make that possible, and the tools and the skills needed. So next slide, please, Lori. Yes. And so some of the common reasons why people don't take action, why they don't make that move, and they continue to be that bystander, is because they look around and they see a situation go down and they're like, well, nobody else is doing anything. So why should I step in? Why should I step up? Why should I do anything? Why should I say anything? Um, and if they do say something, then they also get, you know, my favorite, what I call the excuse is, oh, it's a cultural difference. It's a cultural thing. You don't understand it. You don't know. You don't get it because you're not American enough to get it. So it's a cultural thing. Don't worry about it. Um, and that if you do say something, you know, will you even make a difference at all? Um, will it just be another grain of salt and that's it? It'll be completely overlooked. Um, and at the same time, right? Because it's that grain of salt and it doesn't matter at all. It's not your problem. So why get involved? Why get involved at all? And if nobody is actually, being violent here, it's a harmless thing. It's absolutely harmless. Words are just being thrown out there, right? We can get over it. We'll all live. It'll be fine. That's okay. And then also, if you do say something, if you do something, there's that fear of, okay, will I make things worse? Will I think make things worse than actually make it better? You know, once I do get involved or not. Mhm. Next slide, please, Lori.
So I just wanted to share this quote. Heather Cox Richardson is a historian, and she has been doing letters from an American, kind of does a new letter to the American people every single day. So if you want to subscribe to her, she always has kind of an interesting historical perspective on what is happening currently. And so, Letters from an American, Heather Cox Richardson kind of highlights that it's important to recognize that there's an ideology behind the MAGA Republicans that is part of America. It's one that has ruled us in the past, and it is one that, until now at least, and the jury is still out, right, that we have always overcome. And so there is this sense of, from a historical perspective, that we as a nation have always interlinked economics and economic well-being with racism. Those things have been tied together from the time of slavery, and there are multiple instances of it throughout history where those arguments become convoluted, and we other immigrants, we other people of different races or ethnicities in this idea that we will benefit economically if we continue to scapegoat groups that have been marginalized from that kind of achieving the American dream as it is, or from economic stability. So the historical perspective is an interesting one to note because it has deep kind of ideological roots in this country, linking these things together. And that's sometimes where this also becomes difficult. And as New was highlighting in her slides too, the kind of the power dynamics that interweave some of this work. So New kind of talked about the barriers to upstanding and some of the things that get in our way, but what does the research say about our intentions to confront? What are we kind of going through in our minds when we're willing to do that upstanding? And one of the top reasons that people are willing to say something is they believe it'll make a difference, and that the behavior of the perpetrator will change. So the person who's targeting somebody else, who's being the bully, that if you say something or you do something, you're going to change their behavior, is very high on the list of giving that intention. The other interesting thing to note is a sense of self-efficacy and agency. So if you as a person feel like you have enough kind of power and privilege to kind of step into that space of saying something and confronting a situation, you are more likely to confront in that situation as well. And again, New sort of mentioned that too, is like seen as being the complainer all the time, or like, how are you perceived in that situation? And do you feel like you have that kind of agency to be taken seriously and to be able to do something? Other interesting ideas, like this belief that the act was intentional. Again, New sort of highlighted like it's a cultural thing, right? Like sometimes people say, oh, if that's that's their generation. And they just, they don't know. And that was normal then. And so then there's this idea that there was no ill intent. and yes, it happened, but we'll just move on, and kind of goes back to that changing in the behavior of the perpetrator as well. And to believe that the act caused harm, even if it just was a comment and it wasn't anything physically violent. It's like those little microaggressions that over time start to add up, and those messages that you hear when you're kind of in that space of being targeted, and start to believe, right, that those things start to add up. And in the moment, it may not seem like there was harm caused, but the cumulative effect of those kinds of incidents definitely cause harm. This is kind of interesting, this idea that it's structural versus personal. So, is it the system? Again, New mentioned the Pickford case, right, where they found that USDA had systemically um, like not allowed people of color access to loans, agricultural loans, or services within USDA offices. And that it was much easier to be like angry at the machine or at the kind of the system versus believing that somebody would intentionally cause another someone harm. So sometimes it's easy to get folks engaged in confronting a situation if they think it's the system that's the problem. Feelings of danger or unsafety. So, we always want to be sure, physically, emotionally safe, that, sometimes when we're in a space of upstanding, we know that we have our own weaknesses in terms of that turning on us, and how dangerous is the situation. And ultimately, I spent a good part of my life, and my first job was as a lifeguard, right? You always want to kind of make sure that you're safe when you go to save somebody else. Otherwise, you're going to get pulled right into the pool with them. So that is a very real balance that one has to weigh in terms of if you're going to confront. And we'll talk a little bit about what are some strategies, and that's ultimately what the training is the ability to kind of have multiple tools in our tool belt to be able to address situations when they happen.
And Lori, I believe it was this slide that you had shared before of the airport, like the see something, say something. Yes, I just want to bring that up because I always love that as like my visual, like go back to.
I know we all yeah, that got drilled in our head, and it is definitely a good catchphrase to remember. So, what is the response then? And what is likely to lead to somebody actually feeling compelled to become an upstander? So, first of all, obviously, you have to see something and you recognize that it is discrimination or bias or potentially harmful. Um, is the event likely to cause harm? Like, is it already escalating to violence? That's going to make this timeline feel a little bit faster. Uh, what do you feel like in terms of what your responsibility is in this situation to do something? And then the response, so oftentimes, even if it's a comment, you think afterwards, I know it's happened for me, it's like, what would I have said? I should have said that. I should have said something. So being able to practice and rehearse what our response would be so that we know what to do, if all of those things are kind of along that line, we know what to do in a situation, we've rehearsed it, we're ready for it, then we're ready to address it. So that's what we want to kind of do with our training and with the time that we have when we are in person and have the opportunity to do some skills practice, is move us along that continuum, look at case studies, look at examples, kind of understand where those points along the way are, and then what our response would be so that we're ready when it does happen. So again, if you know what to do, then you're more likely to respond. So I guess that's the from news kind of reminder of, if you see something, say something. It's like if you know what to do, you're more likely to respond. And so that's where we hope we will leave you wanting more and ready to join us in practice. So I guess the first kind of piece of this practice is, it's always good to have a good acronym. So from to upstander, we're gonna call it take a stand. So these are sort of the tasks and things that you can do in a moment, and it's not like you do all of them. You can pick and choose what makes the most sense. But the first thing is the S, which is switch the focus. So sometimes it's just a matter of, you're noticing something is getting tense. You could drop something. You could ask somebody for the time. You could act like you know somebody in the situation, not even necessarily the person who's being targeted, but maybe the person who's doing the targeting. It's like, didn't I meet you somewhere? Weren't we together? And then like, and just take their focus away. The other more direct thing that you could do, and again, these are not necessarily in an order as you would assess the situation, is just to tell them to stop, in whatever that looks like, whether it's a, hey, that's not necessary, or let's take a break, or whatever, or it's just a matter of like, oh, that felt really insensitive, or that felt like you know discriminatory or whatever, like call it out. It depends on your relationship with that person or not, as well as to like what that tell them to stop might look like. A is ask for help. So sometimes we're in a situation where there is somebody that has some authority. So let's say you're in a store and maybe there's a store manager and they have it in their business interest that people in that store have a good shopping experience, all of their customers. So maybe you go up to a store manager and ask for help. I think that you could ask other people that are around you to join you and provide some help in the situation or tell people what you're noticing. We always want to just take a moment and recognize that in some situations, maybe folks that have more privilege and have really good relationships with law enforcement, their first inclination is to call 911. And that we always want to kind of think through the dynamics of the situation and whether or not that would be helpful. Clearly, if someone has a weapon, if it's like lives are in danger, sometimes that does seem to be like the next step, but I think always we want to be aware of calling in law enforcement if there's mental health issues, if there's the potential that law enforcement is going to take the side of the folks that had been targeted rather than the person who had been doing kind of the bullying or had been the perpetrator. So always kind of have some balance in terms of asking for help. Nurture is more about like, what are we doing about the person who just experienced this situation? So are you able to, if something happens in a checkout line, go out to the parking lot and catch up with them and say, hey, I noticed that, and are you okay? So this is like that follow-up. Do you need me to help you get someplace? Can I be helpful here? Do you have someone you can talk to or call? Again, just depending on what the situation is, it's always nice to at least kind of check in. And then document is the last for stand. And I know cell phones are just everywhere now. And obviously, we've seen incidents where people have documented horrible things on their cell phones. And if you document, be thinking about a few things. Number one, be thinking about if this is something that's going to end up in a court, you want to do something in your documentation, whether it's your voice saying, this is the date, this is where I am. Um, if you're near a street corner, if you're near a business, to at least catch that on film as well, so that it puts the incident in a place and a date. And then the other thing to note about documenting is I think so often people get their phones out and then they're posting and all of that. But ultimately, thinking about that documentation belongs to the person who was the victim in that situation. And so it is their property, I would say. So if you do get it, if you do get a film or you do get something documented on your phone, you want to go up to that person and say, I caught that on my phone and I would like to send it to you. It is yours, it is not mine. So just be really clear about documenting. This isn't, your opportunity to post things on social media and make it a spectacle. This is really honoring the person who was harmed in the situation and ensuring that they have access to the resources that they would need if they want to pursue any sort of legal action or if they need that documentation for future. So those are all of the things that are available. And when we are together, we'll play with some of these in terms of skill practice with different situations. So here's one such example or situation. So we had this in our last in-person training, and it got a lot of discussion, which we're not going to be able to have here in this virtual space, but maybe when we see each other and have the opportunity to chat. So the situation is you overhear, you're standing in a checkout line in your local grocery store, and you hear somebody commenting on the purchases of the customer in the line in front of you. And the comment was, I didn't think Mexicans ate Chinese food. So there's a lot missing in this scenario. But I think that then you can see that stand there of switch the focus. So how might you do that in that moment? Maybe you talk to the person who got that comment, or maybe you say, "Oh, I've tried that brand and that's really great." Or you like make some sort of comment and make the person switch, whether it's the checker or the person that you feel is being targeted, have the focus switch from them and have them not feel necessarily if you got this, maybe they're going to be, maybe they'll be sassy like new and just be like, hey, what are you talking about? We also want to give people the space to be able to have their own authority and efficacy. But if you're feeling like that, you get that sense the person is feeling targeted, then that might be nice. And then maybe when you get to your turn with that checker, you could say something, especially in a local grocery store where you're likely to see the same people over and over again. I know that I always see the same person that owns my little local grocery store. So is that the opportunity to say something to them? And it may not be that the person that they kind of said, I didn't think Mexicans ate Chinese food, but after that person is gone, at least you can be like, hey, there's lots of different kinds of foods out there, and I think it's really great you carry that kind of variety and kind of reflect the communities changing and like have that conversation. Um, Maybe in this ask for help, maybe it's a checker and you know that there's a store owner or manager that might want to know that that interaction happened and that you kind of felt like it put the customer at dis-ease and you didn't think that it felt very welcoming and it felt like it was calling somebody out. Again, you could, catch up with them in the parking lot, and just, say, hey, I heard that and I'm sorry that this is the community, but know that I'm here and I'm glad you're here and, just at least kind of checking in. And then documenting, I don't know, in this situation, if you feel like that's all that necessary, maybe it's a positive documenting where you could go on, some sort of social media and say, hey, the store has all these great different kinds of cultural food. We should all go in and make sure that they keep carrying it. But sometimes I think for those of us that are in that ally upstander space, it's good for us to be visible too and let people know that they're not alone. And several of these steps kind of enable that as well.
Yes, I think, in this situation with little context, I would do the switch the focus would be my first approach to it. Um, I would like, oh my gosh, but you know, to the checker, I would say, oh my gosh, but have you had that though? It's so good. Like it's so good. Have you tried it though? I'm also a huge foodie. So, or I would say, you know, you're right. Maybe this is not the best brand, but have you tried this other brand though? The same dish. Oh, just amazing. But who knows, right? Who knows what kind of a situation that actually is with the little context we've had. So yes, given that, right, there are some examples to think about, um, right, that we've provided. So with each situation here, explain and think about, these three questions in mind as you are thinking about this. And the three questions are: what isms or prejudice does the situation describe? What might be some of the barriers to addressing it for the people involved? What might support or enable intervention? Right. And so the first example is: a friend is joking with another in front of you about a casserole dish that has gone back and forth. One friend says, "You are the Indian giver of kitchenware." What do you do in that situation? What do you what comes through? What do you see? What is rolling through your little brain? The second scenario is your good friend at work is Latina. You're having a winter holiday party at your home and plan to email invites to friends. You realize that you have never hung out socially with your work friend and worry about inviting her, thinking she might not be comfortable. And this is a great example too of without much context, right? There is the yes, there's the Latina friend to consider for, right? But there's the self check too. In this scenario, I see this as both of like, okay, yes, we're being considered the Latina coworker, but what does this say also about ourselves? So it's a reflection of ourselves too. So checking our own biases as well. And the third example is when you ask a neighboring dairy farmer who is a deep supporter of current ICE raids and immigration policy about concerns for his farm labor answers about his mostly Venezuelan workforce. He doesn't mean my Mexican. Think about it. If you want to jot down your notes, your thoughts, bring it to the in person. We will have some time to, hash a little bit of this out, what everybody thinks, what observations you've made. But some scenarios for you to ponder and think about in the meantime until we see you in person. Next slide, please, Lori. And speaking of, meeting next, you can definitely interact with us on the Egg Solidarity Network. This is a platform for the community to be able to come together. There are various groups on this platform. The Egg Solidarity Network is also known as ASN. And so if you hear me refer to ASN a lot, this is the network that we are talking about. So Laura, if you would go to the next slide for me, please. Yes, so we have a farmer ally group. We do some vetting for you to join this group. This is a private group. We do want to make sure that it's not just anybody who can come in and join this group. We want to make sure that it is a welcoming, safe, brave space. And that, those of us who are in the group are like-minded and that we have that welcoming, brave, safe space to be able to share openly about situation that's going on, what's happening, any advices that we may need. Um, so this is one example of the groups on the ASN that you can join us, and
Yes.
to continuously have these conversations as well.
And I think to also make us visible to other farmers on the ASN that we are a member of this farmer ally group so that we are potentially somebody that they can kind of ping and direct message if they need support in their own communities.
Mhm. Yeah. Next slide, please, Lori. Yes. And so speaking of that, there is a live feed. There's also a live feed that if you want to just ask the general public on ASN about anything at all, if you would like to post up anything as well, you could do that on the live feed and you can communicate with them in the moment, as well. So yes. So here are some of the groups that are on ASN. Right now, some of them are private, as I've mentioned before, as you could see with the Farmer Ally group. Um, and then there are some that are public that you can just join, and there is no vetting involved in that situation. You can go into, the groups, and you can kind of see and do your exploration of like, okay, what's actually happening, what's going on with that group, especially if it's a public group. You can be able to see, oh, who's also involved in that group, who's in that group, what are they talking about, what's been brought up. Um, and you can ask questions on those groups as well. Yeah, so how do you participate? How do you, join and become a part of the Egg Solidarity Network? So first of all, you go onto the website and you build your profile. You can add your photos, your details um, about, your farm, your profession, your skills, interests. There's check boxes that you could check off. There are fill in options that you could do. You can put in more information, and then you can find groups that match your interests, and you can join them. Um, you will get targeted content depending on some of the check marks you do check off for the groups. It will be sent to you via reminders. Um, and then, you create your first post on the live feed to introduce yourself. You share who you are and why you've decided to join the platform. And you'll have others welcoming you to it. Next slide, please. And then ongoing participation. I've mentioned this a little bit, right? You can always go onto the live feed to have ongoing conversations. There are more than that, though, on this platform. You could post and search for events and opportunities if you're hosting an event, if you have an upcoming event that you think that is absolutely amazing, would be a great benefit to individuals on the Egg Solidarity Network, and you have the permission to post that event and those opportunities, you are welcome to do that. It is definitely a space to build community. And so if you want to search, a certain production, a person, a location, you're able to do that. You want to participate in, the buy, sell, trade classifieds page. Um, you have the ability to do that as well on AS, and definitely once you're in there, invite other farmers, invite other individuals, egg service providers, to be a part of it. Share the ASN with your network. We want this to definitely be an, allyship of communities coming together.
So we are really hoping our paths will cross in the near future, whether on the ASN or in person. But I wanted to just kind of share some resources in the meantime. Obviously, mental health in this time for a lot of us is a real struggle. And then there are just some real practical steps that we and resources that we need in terms of rights, particularly as we're seeing kind of the ramping up of more ICE presence in communities. And so this WTF group is great. It was started by Dania Davies, who is the principal at Land and Liberation. She's done a lot of work on heirs property rights and in other kind of social justice spaces in agriculture. And she puts these resources out. So she's an attorney by background. And so these are a great collection of resources. And she also hosts meetings every Friday, live meetings for folks that are just needing a safe space to kind of talk about what's happening at the federal level, what's happening at the community level, and how we can kind of reframe the conversation around a culture of care and mutual aid, which is ultimately what our whole approach to this allyship network and ally group and the training is meant to uplift. So here is a QR code for our next in-person event. So be sure to kind of aim your phone camera there and it'll take you to registration.
And we hope to see you there in person. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody.